I've frequently seen requests to have AUD callouts or work locations that include color or other text variations to make things more interesting and readable. For example, when you're showing materials at a work location, color and text underlining can make information clearer. Until recently, every case I'd seen handled this using complicated callout or work location blocks that contained multiple attributes with different colors. Indeed, I did a video sometime back that showed how you could have 3 attributes stacked directly on top of each other to show material data using different colors. But there's a better way. It's something that's been in AutoCAD for years. Let's use an example using work locations that show the materials at the location. So to begin, I have a work location block here with 3 attributes. One for the work location name, one for the station ID that appears to the right, and one below the work location to display the list of materials. And note the second and the third attributes have been defined as multi-line attributes, which is essential if I'm going to show a list. Okay, now I'm here in AUD. I have a pole with some attachments. The pole and framing is set to existing modified status. One of the transformers is set to removal. The other is set to new. I'll add a work location now. You can see that the different statuses are displayed with the materials. In AUD, I'll select the Configure Material List option, and on the Work Location Style tab, you can see the definition for this work location. The name field populates the first attribute, the station ID has a rule associated with the station ID, and the material field is used in the Material Summary rule. Here's the rule that I'm using, and here's the resulting work location. This rule uses the list to text command, getting the data from the material list. Because it's defined in the work location section of the text rules, it generates a list for the materials at a given work location. The list is grouped by the status values, and this part about displaying the group values means that the status values will be used as a header for each group. Here you can see the list is being filtered so that only the new, existing, modified, and removal components are shown, not the existing components. The second part of this filter ensures that only CUs are shown, not all the components within a CU. The text that will be displayed for each material entry includes the CU and the quantity. And by setting the delimiter to new line, each different material appears on a new line in the display. Okay, now let's look at an improved version that still uses the list to text command in the standard way. This is frankly exactly like the previous command, except for the group by clause. In this case, I'm hacking the value we're grouping by. So instead of directly using the status value, I'm using values based on the status. My replacements are different in 2 ways. First, the status values are capitalized, and they're a little different. Existing instead of existing modified, and retire instead of removal. And second, I have a \O before each text string and a \o after each text string. Let's look at the results. It's easier to read now because I've substituted capital letters and simplified the text for each section. And the \O adds an overline to each of the status fields. Note, I could have also used \L to create underlines, but in this case, the list to text function is automatically adding them as part of the grouping. Now let's take it a step further. Here's another alternative for my material summary. This time, in addition to using the overline, I have a /C followed by a number, 5 for the new status, 1 for the removal status, and 7 for the existing modified status. Remember your AutoCAD numbering. 1 is red, 5 is blue, 7 is black. I'll switch to use this new rule, and let's see what the result is. This looks like the previous display, but now the text is showing in different colors. Okay, one more example that's going to be a bit different. What if I want to reorder the status groups? Well, right now there's no way within the list to text command to do this. There's no way to order these things differently. There's no right way to solve this, but here's an example that can work. In this case, I'm going to create a rule that calls another rule. My new material summary rule looks pretty simple. That's because it's calling the material summary part rule. This rule takes a passed parameter that indicates the status value. So the master rule here calls the material summary part rule 3 times, once for each status value. Here's the material summary part rule. Here you can see the custom parameter, which I use to pass the status value. I will say this approach is not as elegant as I'd like, because at least for AUD 7.3, which I use to create these examples, you cannot use a custom parameter within the list to text rule. So instead, I simply replicate the rule 3 times within. Each section is identical except for the status values. Now note a couple things here. Because I can't use the passed parameter within the list to text rule, I'm only using it within the choose value statement. So these values aren't actually from the status domain, they're just text strings. What's important is that the text passed from the master rule matches the text in the choose value options. There are 2 parts to each section. The first checks to see if there are any materials with that given status value, because if there are no new materials for this work location, we don't want to display the header for new. So if there are materials, we execute this statement here, otherwise we output nothing. And then each section contains 4 elements. First is the header. Now note that because the list to text function is no longer generating the category headers for status values, we have to include both the /O for the overlined and a /L for generating the underline. A new line is then included so that the materials begin to appear on the line below the header. The list of materials is generated again by list to text, with the exception that we're not doing the categorization by status any longer. And then there's a final new line so that any subsequent content appears on the line below the last material item that was output. So now that you've seen what's in this rule, let's look at the final result. So you can see now that things are ordered new and then existing and then retire. And you can see that the colors are set and we still have the overline and the underline. Here's a list of all the formatting codes you'll find most useful. This includes overline, underline, and color, which we've already demonstrated. You can also use a /H, either plus a value to change the text height, or a /H followed by a number, followed by an X and a semicolon to change the text height to a multiple of the current text height. There are functions for changing the obliquing angle, the width factor, and a couple functions for stacking and aligning text. More information can be found on the original Autodesk page, which you can find by searching for Format Codes for Alternate Text Editor Reference on the web. As with all my videos, well, there's a lot more we could cover, but that will have to wait for another day and another video.